Hello everybody. I sometimes get asked via Instagram by people, which is the best kind of entry level beginner. I'm just getting back into shooting film, or I've not shot film before, but I want a camera. And I don't want to spend loads of money, but I want an SLR, something where I can buy lenses and I can get that kind of like shallow depth of field for portraits, those sorts of things. But I don't want to break the bank. I just want to spend, say, 30, £40, something like that, under £50, under kind of $50. What can I get? What's a kind of good camera to get? And these are the two that I would, if you're kind of looking at film, getting in a film camera, and you want something where you're going to be able to get a nice blurry background and all those sorts of things. These are the two cameras that I think are great to get because they're not that expensive. You can put really good lenses on them, but you can buy cheap lenses to start with, and they're kind of like a gateway camera into more expensive cameras if you find that you really love shooting film and you want to get more cameras. So the two cameras are the Nikon AV1. Now everybody wants, I've seen the popularity of the Canon AE1 program, and I've had that camera, and that is a great camera, and it does a lot of things this camera doesn't do. But do you know what this camera does that the AE1 program can't do? Is it's got aperture priority. And to be honest, aperture priority is just the best thing to have in a camera. In my opinion, everything I shoot, whether it's digital or film or anything, I stick it in aperture priority half the time. And I think if a lot of people were a bit more honest about kind of what settings they use all the time, you tend to go with aperture priority, because what that means is you set the aperture on the lens. So f1.8 is letting in lots of light, background's really blurry, and like all the way up to f22, that's like landscapes where you want everything in focus, right? So on this camera, you set the aperture, and the camera works out what the shutter speed should be. So you don't need to worry about shutter speed. You just have that creative thing where you decide like how you want to take photos, how blurry you want the background by changing the aperture, and then the camera works out the shutter speed. And that is a really nice way to take photos with a film camera, especially if you've got a 50mm f1.8 lens, because that's a great sort of all-purpose lens. But that one f1.8, that means you can blur the background out. So if you're kind of thinking about getting a film camera, and the AE1 program's looking a bit expensive these days, I would get the AV1. It's cheaper, and it's got aperture priority. And the only thing I found with this is you just need to make sure you get a battery for it. And if you pull down on here, battery goes in there, and it's a A544 battery. If you can kind of see that there, an A544, like that. Pop that in. It's got a little needle in there, so when you can't really see it here, but when you look through and you change, as you're changing the aperture on the lens, depending on like with the light, and as you're shooting wide open or you're stopping it all the way down to f22, the needle is moving up and down, and it's telling you what shutter speed it's going to take the photo at. So you can see the shutter speed, but that aperture priority mode is fantastic. I would definitely recommend the AV1, and you can pick these up quite cheap. Okay, second recommendation is the Nikon EM. This is another camera that doesn't have shutter priority. It's exactly the same. You set the aperture on the lens, and it works out the shutter speed. Again, you look through the viewfinder. There's a little needle. It's moving up and down as you're changing the aperture. You're letting in more light or reducing the amount of light coming in to increase what's in focus. That needle's going up and down, so it's telling you what the shutter speed's going to be based on what aperture you've set. So again, really easy. All you need to think about with these two cameras is focusing, which you just do manually, and what aperture you want, which is a kind of like the artistic setting, really, the aperture, because it's all about like what's in focus and what's not in focus. And these cameras are both, I would say, sub 50 quid. And if you're lucky, you can often get them you know, with the lens on the camera for that price. And these are both great lenses, and I use this 50mm f1.8 E-series lens on Nikon F2 and other cameras, but it was kind of designed for the Nikon EM. And I've done another video on the Nikon EM where I go into this camera in a lot more detail. And I've done a video on the Canon AE1 program as well, but I kind of think the AE1 program is a bit overrated. I think get the AV1 for that aperture priority. I know you haven't got all the program modes and the shutter priority and everything else, but having aperture priority is fantastic. And I tend to shoot personally in aperture priority anyway, most of the time, so I don't need all those other settings. And these are reasonably lightweight because they're not like big, heavy metal cameras in the same way that some of the big SLRs are. Particularly the Nikon EM. This is a bit more of a plastic camera. This has got a bit of metal on it, but anyway, that was kind of that. If you had a slightly bigger budget, Nikon FE, the first one, not the FE2. The FM and the FM2 and the FE2 are getting a bit expensive, but the original Nikon FE, you can still get these cameras, if you're lucky, for a little bit more. And this is an all-metal camera. Again, you just put it in auto, and that's aperture priority, but you then can, if you want to, set the shutter speed. But I leave it in auto. I set the aperture on the lens, the camera works at the shutter speed. That's all I want, really. So that is if you want something a bit better than the EM, the FE is a really good camera. But these two cameras are great ways to get into shooting film where you've got the nice sort of SLR lenses. And once you get really into it, you can start buying more lenses. Like this EM, another good lens you can get for it is this E-series 35mm f2.5. And that's a really lovely lens that you can get that will go on this camera. And that was it. That was my very quick review of two really great cameras for getting into shooting film where you want an SLR. Like and subscribe, and I will make more videos. Thank you.